let's make this a discussion and fairly relaxed. I'm Carol Wogren, as Brian said, and I am a clinical psychologist, background in nursing, and I have been working for the past 10 years in Zimbabwe and some other southern and eastern, living in Zimbabwe, working also in some other southern eastern African countries. I, though now recently relocated back to Boston, continue to work in Zimbabwe. And I have been working predominantly over the last number of years with young people children, adolescents, young people living with HIV. And I work now, I think what I will do is share the slides. Let me ask, are you familiar with EQUIP, which is a World Health Organization -UNICEF program that's been developed for this purpose, of the purpose of really working towards ensuring quality in lay counselors? Is this a program any of you are familiar with, which I'll be talking about this as a mechanism for building the skills of peer counselors?
I can say I am a licensed HIV testing counselor in the state that I live, and I'm also a certified peer specialist, working more with adults. So know a little bit, but that's why I'm here to learn more. Thank you.
So, Tanya, you're familiar with it. You're going to hear some description that you know. But also, just to start, so as I said, I'm with Zvandiri, which is a peer-led, differentiated service delivery program for children, adolescents, and young people living with HIV. And our peer counselors are our frontline service workers. And so just to, okay, Brian, point of interest, I'm now, seeing the slides as they typically would be. What fixed it, I have no clue. So a little bit about who our peer counselors are and why we tried this new initiative is, as I said, they are our frontline workers. They take on, they're fabulous for one thing, and they take on a lot of responsibility. As you see here, they work with, we have both our CATs, our community adolescent treatment supporters. They're our main group of peer counselors. And then we have a smaller subgroup, our young mentor mothers. And our young mentor mothers have all the qualifications of being a CATS, which I will talk about in just a minute, as well as they are, as you would guess by their title, they are young mothers. And so they have additional responsibilities. For people who are not familiar or aren't embedded in the HIV world, as we know, globally, incidents or deaths from HIV have really markedly reduced over the past few decades in both adults and also in children. But in adolescents, they have not. They have either remained stable level or even increased. And so this is a concern, obviously, and we are making an effort. We have good data, including randomized controlled trial, that peers are a very effective in the workforce in improving adherence, viral load suppression in young people living with HIV. So helping tackle this problem or try to get on top of it. So our peer counselors are really an amazing part of the workforce. They have a lot of responsibility. They conduct home visits to other children, adolescents, young people up to age 24 who are living with HIV. They work with families, with caregivers. They run support groups. They work with the health workers. Maslin, you mentioned being familiar with adults, but not so much children. or adolescents. And we find this is actually the case a lot with the health workers, or not the mental health of young people, which we know mental health of young people living with HIV, largely due, we believe, to stigma and discrimination, is they have a lot more mental health challenges than their HIV negative peers. And healthcare workers tell us they are not necessarily as comfortable counseling adolescents and children as they are adults. So our cats work with them. They work closely with them. They work with people in the health facilities. We work with Ministry of Health, and our peer supporters are all linked with a government health facility with an art clinic. And they also provide a fair amount of support using digital health in a variety of ways. And as I think many people found, that markedly increased with COVID. One of the few good things that came out of the pandemic, there are not a lot, but two of them are the world woke up to the importance of mental health. And also we started using digital platforms that we had available to us, but we did not necessarily take advantage much as we meant to prior to the pandemic. And so our adolescent peer supporters, our cats, show that through their work, and again, we have good research as well as program data on this, they improve HIV testing, art adherence, viral load suppression. We saw that with our cats, viral load suppression increased 42% compared to young people who were not supported by cats. Retention and care, improved mental health, improved knowledge and engagement with sexual reproductive health and rights, and with child protection, social protection, and also prevention. So we know that they are a very effective group. Our challenge is how we best train and support them. So who our peer counselors are, and let me also say again, we're a small group. When I'm doing my slides, I don't easily see or always notice hands or anything. Please feel free to make this a discussion, not necessarily hold questions or comments to the end. And feel free to either put up your hand and hope that I notice it, but whether I notice it or whether you don't, or if you don't feel like it, just unmute and chime in, please. And again, so this point in the day, it's nice if we can actually have this as a discussion. So I know when I get talking, I can kind of get going quickly and kind of barrel right along. So please jump in. So our counselors, who they are, is they are young people themselves living with HIV. They're 18 to 24 years old. They are on ART and when they are selected, I will say, to be cats, they are supposed to be adhering well, in part shown by a suppressed viral load. But because they are young people living to 18 to 24 who have all the same challenges as do their peers who they're supporting, they also have challenges. They sometimes don't do as well, but theoretically, they're young people who can serve as a role model. This is a choice. They're willing to engage as cats, which does mean a certain amount of self-disclosure and disclosure of status, which those of you in Zimbabwe or from Zimbabwe know that despite years of advocacy, incredible progress made in treating HIV, there's still a huge number of myths, misconceptions, and stigma resulting from that. So they're also young people who have good soft skills. They have good interpersonal skills. They have good leadership. They show leadership skills. They're supposed to be able to read and write. Sometimes in some of the rural areas in the health facilities, they have trouble finding someone who's been able to stay in school. So that criteria we like if they can meet. They need to be out of school, meaning either completed school or are not anticipating going back to school because they work during the daytime, and we don't want to be in the position where we are interrupting their school. And regardless of, at 18, they are of the age of majority legally in Zimbabwe, but it's important they live with caregivers. It's important that they have the consent of caregivers and the support of caregivers to do the work as cats. And again, it's fairly demanding. Their selection is done joint with the healthcare facilities, the healthcare workers. They work under the supervision of the nurse in charge in the facility. And so it's the healthcare workers who know these young people, who recommend them to become cats. One of the things that they've seen is being a cat's really contributes to kind of self-esteem and self-confidence. So sometimes they will recommend people who they think would benefit from being a cat, but we need role models. So we also have a screening. We do a mental health screening. We do an interview and all that for them to become cats. And so they are recruited. They are, as I said, they're selected by Zvandiri staff, and we have teams in each of the districts where we are located. That varies a bit by donor funding, but we are represented in most districts in the country. And we work with Ministry of Health and Child Care. Cats, when they are selected, they get a 1-week intensive training, and then that's followed by further training in the clinic that they are attached to. This is facilitated by Zvandiri and the Ministry of Health, and we use a standard curriculum that Ministry of Health has given input into and approved. They theoretically get weekly supervision meetings at the clinic with the nurse in charge or the designated nurse or primary counselor. And they get on-site mentorship visits from Zvandiri mentors, who the mentor is the head of the district team. And depending on the grant funding, they get bi-monthly or quarterly mentorship cats coordination meetings, where all the cats from a given district come together for a meeting to address various problems and challenges, talk about their work, and do some capacity development, skill building. So Zvandiri has been scaling. Not only have we scaled across the country, but we are scaling in the continent, partly promoted by World Health Organization as a best practice model. And we've now been taken up in 12 sub-Saharan African countries. And when we are taken up by a country, we don't go and open an office. We work with, ideally with MOUs with Ministry of Health or with projects in programs in the countries. And we provide technical support to help them take up the model well and implement it in their country. And in some of the countries, we send a staff member to work on the ground with them for 6 months or a year. But we provide close supervision. But so what this means is at this point in time, across Zimbabwe and the other countries, we now have 3,000 peer counselors. So 3,000 young people ages 18 to 24 living with HIV who are providing support to 90,000 children, adolescents, and young adults living with HIV. And that number is growing pretty regularly. So with this, it brings tremendous opportunity, but it also brings challenges. And so, as you see, we have a very large cohort of young counselors who are covering a vast number of regions, countries, cultures, and settings. And we feel strongly we need to figure out how to ensure quality of care. So, as you all know, I'm sure from any program you work in, it's one thing to have bodies in the chairs of the people who, have gone through a training or are in the positions. It's another to say that the people who are in these positions really do have the capacity to do the work and are doing the work that we're saying they're doing. And so, because, as I said, we really need to improve the health and well-being of adolescents and young adults living with HIV. And this is a challenge globally. So we also know we need to give, and I've heard this mentioned in some different talks today, and I could not agree more. When we have peer counselors, particularly young peer counselors, which is who I'm oriented to, I shouldn't, it's not more important than others probably, but it's who I know and work with. But young people who are facing a lot of challenges themselves, they show a tremendous amount of resilience, stepping to the plate. They're very invested in helping their peers. And we need to be sure to provide them with adequate support for their own lives and for the work that they're doing. And then this is all done in the context of having very limited resources for training. So we can't always hold the trainings as frequently or the length of trainings or whatever as we would ideally like to do because we are dependent on donor funding. And I think any of you who work with donor funding know that donors, we appreciate them very much, but that also sometimes resources can get cut back, but services are expected to not, and we don't always have the magic wand that it would really take to be able to implement what we would like to on very limited funds. So that's our challenge. Before I jump into EQIP specifically, what we did and why we did it, any comments or questions on the context that I just set up, what the peer counselors we work with and why?
I followed.
Okay, I'll take yeah, otherwise silence as, no. That everybody is either right with me or nodding off, one or the other, but either way. So trying to figure out how we ensure quality, we decided to employ this program that has been developed by World Health Organization and UNICEF that they have called EQIP. It's ensuring quality and psychological support. And it's a project that is aimed specifically at doing that. It's aimed at trained non-professional care providers, such as peer counselors, other lay counselors. One of the reasons for this is really around the world with the growing awareness of the importance of mental health, but very limited professional mental health services. There's been a movement to what is often called task shifting or task sharing of training integrating mental health into first line care and training first line counselors to provide better mental health services. With the idea being if we can get really people on the community level better identified and cared for, we don't have the high demand that we end up with for the professional services or the specialized services. So EQIP is for basically trainers and supervisors to help improve the quality of their workers' their helping skills and to reduce the potential of harm. As we know, the desire to help does not always completely immediately translate into, in fact, helping. And there are risks that are involved in any counseling, really. And so we want to ensure that we increase the capacity to provide good service and we decrease the risk of potential harm or of unhelpful behaviors. And so what EQIP is a competency assessment tool that focuses on assessing demonstrated skills. And it is specifically to help trainers and supervisors track trainees' progress in the areas that they need more practice. Though our experience is not only does it help us track them, it also helps us at the beginning in really assuring that we are adequately training. So EQIP is set up to provide these services either to provide this assessment tool for adults who are over the age of 25 or over the age of 18 or children. There's a different assessment called WeAct, and that's up until the age of 18. And in these tools, so the ENACT is described foundational helping competencies to help those related build warm, trusting relationships between the helper and client, building rapport using verbal and nonverbal communication skills, demonstrating empathy and genuineness. So basically your real foundational helping or counseling skills. And WeAct, which is the child assessment tool, really focuses on foundational competencies that are tailored for helpers and educators delivering care to children and adolescent populations across a number of different sectors. And so for us, there was a challenge in that. We had partnered with, Zimbabwe was chosen as one of an initial 6, and I think it's 9 now, countries that WHO selected for their special initiative on mental health, which is an initiative to improve mental health care in the country. And as part of this special initiative in Zimbabwe, the special initiative, they decided to integrate this program, EQUIP, into a rollout that they're doing of the MH-GAP training, which is training to build the mental health skills of general healthcare workers. And so they were using EQUIP. They were trying to use EQUIP in their MH-GAP trainings. And so we thought, okay, why don't we try it with our cats to see if this works with adolescent peer supporters in helping us really help them develop their skills and for us to assess their skills, the quality of their skills. And so what we had to do, though, is in meetings with WHO, we had to develop a hybrid because, as I said, the ENACT tool is for ages 18 and up. The WeAct tool is for up to 18, but our peer counselors who are 18 to 24 counsel all ages up to age 24. So we straddle that. So we put together a hybrid of the two tools so that we identified 14 competencies that are then assessed as we went through a training. And the competencies, as you see, these are, I think you can see just by the description of the competency, by the title of it, these are really foundation counseling level skills. There's nonverbal communication, verbal communication, explanation and promotion of confidentiality, rapport building, self-disclosure, which is very important with our peer counselors, disclosure that is done properly, done in a helpful way, normalization of feelings, exploring the client's social network, involvement of family members, promotion of realistic hope for change, coping mechanisms, psychoeducation. And we left out some of the adult ones that had to do with kind of more clinical treatments, diagnosis, goal setting. That's not how our cats work. And we pulled in some of the children's one. The wording was different for the empathy, warmth, and genuineness. It was important to have the safety focused on identification of any form of abuse, exploitation, neglect, violence, or self-harm, certainly identifying suicidality, but really having the child protection focus in there. Giving feedback to the child, as you know, that's different with children than it is with adults, and promoting a child's agency in the session. And again, a child's agency is developmentally different than the way we promote agency in an adult. So we put these two together so that we had a hybrid that was really more tailored to the work that our peer counselors are doing with the population that we serve. And for those of you not familiar, when we talk about competency, this is just to show you on each of the 14 competencies, you, through observing role plays, you rate each competency as they go through a role play on the various levels. And you go through and you tick. So let's say they showed they glanced at their phone, they were looking around, they laughed at something the client said, They get a tick in that column. Basic helping skills. Do they maintain eye contact? Are they using supportive body language or none of the above? And then there's advanced skills. Do they vary? Do they match themselves to the client? So you tick these, and then based on if they have any harmful behaviors, they get a level 1, no matter what else they have. Do they have some basic skills, all basic skills, and advanced skills? So you go through these after a role play, you go through these 14, these different levels rate on each of the 14 competencies. And then, and so again, just an example, this one, verbal, open-ended questions. How, for anybody who if you're involved in training on counseling, some of these things sound so easy on paper, but my experience over many years of training in many different settings is that really getting people to get this understanding of asking open-ended instead of closed questions. So instead of all the yes/no questions, really a lot more, tell me more about that, can you describe, et cetera, or not asking leading questions. Oh, that must have made you feel angry. All of these sort of things, there's more practice involved than one might expect. Counseling skills really do take a fair amount of reinforcement in learning. And so these are the skills that you go through on each of the 14 competencies. So what we did is we selected 16 cats from where our head office is in Harare, the capital city. And so we selected from Harare district, and that was simply because of budget, so that we could get people in and out, taking transportation to Zvandiri house each day. And we selected 16 because that was how many comfortably fit in the training room, a nice scientific way to do a group. But we had the good fortune that this was a program initiative. This was not a research project per se. And so so that was how we selected. And what we did, we were at the end of a grant funding, and we could not bring on a whole new group of cats. So we asked the district mentors to select a group of cats who had been fairly recently trained. They were newer cats, and they were cats who, in any group, you have really strong ones and you have ones that are not quite as strong and need more capacity development. Some of the cats, struggle for a while at the beginning, or possibly always. And so we said, give us your cats who really need more capacity development. And we ran the standard 5-day cats training, which they had already at one point been through. And to emphasize, our cats training is 5 days. It's focused. It has one of the days focuses more on counseling skills specifically, but mostly it's also on a lot of different topics related to HIV, because they are counselors then when they come out who are supporting adherence, disclosure, etc. for young people and helping them get on, stay on ART, and adhere well for their health. And so what we did is we first did a baseline where they had them do role plays, which is what you see here. You see one of the cats role playing a client, the others role playing the cats. They get very into the role playing. They love them. And we broke into groups of 4. Each had a facilitator. And so this was actually my group, and they were chosen from my group because they were comfortable role playing in English. The other groups, they were able to role play in their primary language, which is Shona. And they each did a role play. They took turns. And after they had all gotten a chance, one was the cats, one the client, one videotaped, and one was the observer, who then had to give feedback before the facilitator. Then the facilitator scored each of the competencies. For the baseline, when they were all done, then gave them feedback. And that was going through the competencies and pointing out things that they had done really well and areas that we would be talking about more in the training, but that they really need to, for example, ask more open-ended questions, or they didn't tell about confidentiality and they didn't, or they talked a lot and didn't listen as much to the client. So we give feedback on them. And then through the training, there's a lot of opportunities for when they say, for example, they get their unit on TB. Then they will have some activities where they can then role play doing a TB screening, but we would tell them before the thing, remember about asking open-ended questions. Remember to ask about family support and who they live with. And so we would give prompts that were, again, referring to the basic counseling skills that they were being assessed, going to be, again, assessed on. And what we found is we did, I will say, actually, I think I started to say, or if I didn't, I left it off the slide. We also did we did midline and endline assessments, doing the same thing in their groups of 4. And what we found was really quite exciting. And that was using this tool. We see at baseline, now you'll see these high numbers, like 199. That is 16 cats. This is the summary of the 14 competencies across 16 cats. And so that gives you, do the math, high number of them. But we see at baseline, a number of the cats showed some harmful or unhelpful behaviors on some of the competencies. A lot of level 2, which may have been that they didn't show harmful ones, but they didn't show any basic counseling skills either. A few at baseline, we see level 3, which would be that they have all of the basic counseling skills, and we didn't see any advanced skills on baseline. By the end of the training, look what we had. Again, this was really exciting. We had no harmful behaviors. We had fewer level 2 baseline ones, which was no or some of the basic skills. A lot more had achieved all the basic counseling skills, and quite a few had achieved some advanced skills. So we really saw in this 1 week of training that was mostly focused on HIV-related topics. This was not a full week of only counseling training. We saw this really significant shift. And so breaking it down some, what we saw at the beginning, remember, these were cats who had been through a training once, and so they had already had some counseling skills training. But I think this is really relevant to, our group is young people living with HIV, and again, they're young adolescent, young adults themselves. But I think this we see, I know we would see similar things when we do this with the healthcare workers, for example. And that is, there are counseling skills that really take a lot of practice. To really listen without interrupting, they would have, when you're not quite sure what to say, what to do, you tend to jump in more. You ask leading questions. And then what I saw with the young people, and again, I would think this would be fairly common with peer counselors, particularly young peer counselors, is giving unrealistic expectations. Oh, no, you'll be fine. Oh, no, don't worry. That's not a problem. No, it won't. But a lot of times the problems being faced by the young people, they are big problems. And there's reason to believe that they will be able to do well, but we can't just kind of brush them off and dismiss feelings. Or ignore emotional responses, because we know as counselors what we want to get through and all the questions that we want to get through. So the problems that we saw, the challenges in counseling skills, I think are ones that we would see pretty typically in fairly newly trained peer counselors, or peer counselors who are not given a lot of support. They've given some training and support, but then they are set off out into on their own without a lot of ongoing ones, which I think is lessons for us. So again, the kind of things that they ran into on baseline, you see, for example, in the normalization of feelings, The unhelpful behaviors, minimizing or dismissing a client's emotions. Again, oh, that's not a big deal. Don't worry about it. You know, I feel like I was doing well, but my boyfriend or girlfriend just broke up with me because they learned my HIV status. And I think I'm never going to find someone who will accept that. How will I ever be able to get married? Will I ever be able to have children? Will I be able to have a normal life? Now we know the answers to those things are actually yes, but there is a lot of very real stigma, and those concerns are real. And so to not sympathize with them, but just dismiss them, we want to help our cats not do. But again, it takes skill to be able to sit with distress of another person without trying to just jump in and do away with it. So we saw that the unrealistic expectations. Oh no, you'll be fine in the role play. In fact, the role play that you saw the picture of, the role playing client said, I just learned I'm HIV positive. My mother died of HIV. I'm afraid I'm going to die too. And the peer counselor jumped in. No, people don't die. You won't die from HIV. People don't die. Well, the fact is they do. You will do well if you are able to adhere well to your medication, have your treatment, all of that. But to just jump in and try to make the distress decrease is a counseling skill that takes some practice. And so using this, we really were able to help the young people themselves identify the challenges that they were running into, what it was that they were finding particularly challenging, and how to, again, getting this at baseline. We knew then as we went through our training, we wanted to specifically really reinforce open-ended questions, and we'd have them practice that. And when you do your role play in the unit on sexual reproductive health, remember to pay attention to your client's feelings. Remember to introduce yourself and describe confidentiality. And in our case, our cats, who are young people working under the supervision of the healthcare workers, they work with what we call shared confidentiality, and that is they do share with the teams that they work on. They are responsible for sharing important information, and particularly when it comes to make sure that they understand about explaining if they hear anything about potential self-harm, including potential suicidal behaviors or thoughts, that they are required to share and potentially immediately with their caregiver, with their supervisors. And we help give them the language to be able to say, I will share, to be sure that we can get you the help that we need and all of that. But it helped us as the trainers and as supervisors identify specifically the concepts that they had absorbed already and the areas that they needed really help in building their skills. We're able to focus on that. And then when we did the end line assessment, we were able to then see what it was that they had really picked up, what they had learned. And to share with you, I recently did an outreach to the cats who had participated in June. So this is now 7 months after the training. And these are a couple samples that these are quotes where they were written. I changed only spelling or a few minor wording to capture their meaning. But this is what they said. One cat said, the training really helped a lot. Before the training, I wasn't that social because I was limited by what to talk about, what to make my client, to make my client adolescent feel better after the session, basically what to say to help them feel better. But after the equipped training, I noticed a lot of changes which benefited me a lot. I was able to talk with confidence with my clients. After the training, I came along with a client who was having mental and social issues, in which when I was talking to her, she started crying, and I gave her time to cry, show her emotions. I listened to everything she said without jumping into her story, which she was sharing, and even allowed her a moment of silence when she was crying. I might not remember all that we learned at the training, but every time I forget something, I use the papers and notes we used at the training. To me, when we think about that, to train peer counselors, it's hard to sit when somebody is experiencing a high level of distress. It's hard to not just jump in when someone starts to cry and want to soothe them, but to really be able to stay with them and allow them to explain. And after this training, where we had really been able to focus on this as something that had been identified that they needed, that this is what stayed with them. Another one said, I would say that I approach peer counseling with more empathy and compassion since the training. I'm more aware of my body language and my tone, and I try to be fully present and focused on the person I'm helping. I mean, is that what we want counselors to do? I also started using more open-ended questions to encourage people to share more about their experiences. And I will say, as I watched them through the week, sometimes I almost fell off of my chair watching these young people. They would engage, they're doing role playing, and they're saying, when someone would say something, can you tell me more about that? Or what was that like for you? And they were asking these beautiful probe questions to really hear about their client's experience. And also, one said when asked, did it make a difference to your beneficiaries? The difference this makes to my beneficiaries is significant. They seem to feel more heard and understood, and they're more likely to share their experiences and feelings with me. And they also seem more willing to try new coping strategies and make positive changes in their lives. So one of the things that we see a lot is, because these young people are very experienced in being looked down on. They are stigmatized for the HIV. Many of them live in homes, they've been orphaned, they live in homes where they feel unwanted. And so they keep their problems to themselves. And when you see them, they're fine. You look at them, they'll smile at you. They look fine, but they don't quickly hand over information about struggling because of fear of being judged as being weak, having something wrong with you, having mental problems, etc. So for a CATS to feel like their clients are actually opening up more to them and sharing their feelings is really a tremendous achievement, I think. And again, not to say that the CATS weren't doing this. Many of them are really impressively strong, who have not been through this training. Remember, we asked for the ones that were having the hardest time. But another said the difference, and I put in from the beginning of the training, is that now I also let the client cry, and I give the client space so that she or he talks free without fear. And another said this was interesting to me, the thing that stands out the most when I think back on the training, that was 7 months ago, is the emphasis on self-care. The trainers really stress the importance of taking care of ourselves so that we can be more effective in our work. I also appreciated the opportunity to practice the techniques we learned in a safe and supportive environment. And this cat said a couple more things about self-care, which was interesting to me. That was not the focus. Because I think the work that they do is hard and they take a lot of responsibility. I weave in a lot about taking care of themselves and them reaching out for help. But it was interesting, just by focusing on building counseling skills, that was a piece that apparently got worked in there more and was picked up on, which again, I thought was really quite exciting. So challenges moving forward and using this. So again, this is a free online platform. All of these tools are available, including their data entry. We could not use their data entry because we did the hybrid, but if you're working with adults or if you're typically working with children, and you can use either the adult or the child scales. But again, this is completely available to you. And so it's definitely a tool I would encourage anybody who's working with peer counselors to think about and use in trainings. But now what do we do moving forward? We added in extra days to do the baseline and midline and line assessments. We didn't have to do the midline, but we wanted to see how on track we were because this was the first time. We had the luxury of holding, this was another role play that you're seeing in the picture there. It was held at head office so we could pull in more trainers than we would necessarily have when we were out in the districts. We found you definitely needed at least 4 facilitators so we could break the group up to conduct the assessments. And so we need to decide, we need to figure out how do we integrate it into standard trainings where we don't have the extra time, we don't have the extra facility, the resources of the extra staff necessarily, and we wouldn't necessarily have extra budget if we rolled it into our regular trainings. Then the other piece though is, so by the end of the training, we're able to say for each of the 16 cats, I'm going to just jump ahead. This is the cat's individual dashboard. So you can say at the end of the training, okay, this one really got, Ian really did well on his verbal communication. By the end line, we see that by a number of the things. He had advanced skills even, but we can see that an area that his assessment of child safety, maybe he could strengthen the way he introduced his warmth and genuineness, that could use some strengthening. So for moving forward, this isn't the best one because he happened to have a lot of advanced skills, but you can really see the areas that in supervision and ongoing mentorship you would really want to continue to develop. So we did just last week, or the week before, we discussed it last week, at the end of the week, we did for the first time introduce integrating EQUIP into a training out in the districts with a group of new cats. And there were 32 cats, new young peer counselors in the training. All 32 were assessed at baseline. We had trained 4 facilitators at the start prior, familiarize them with EQUIP. But then with 32 cats, that was really a big group. They pulled in a few more Zvandiri staff out in the district to help with the assessments, but didn't give enough time really to get them up to speed on the assessments. And only 16 were assessed at end line just due to time demand. So we do know we have to build in you do have to build in extra time to use this well. As I said, 4 were introduced and then a few more were brought in, but didn't quite get enough of the facilitation of the training. So we know that what we have to do is put together a training, which we can do virtually, so it will not have added costs, but to get more of our staff facilitate or capacitated so that they can be assessors in using EQUIP. And the cat's feedback, as you saw, was extreme there, both you saw in the original one, but reportedly by the assessment of the facilitators in the training, that the cats who were trained in this one out in the district were very enthusiastic about it. They seemed to like the feedback. They felt it was a good learning experience for them and seemed quite enthusiastic about it. One of the things I will say is I think it also, as trainers, forced us to integrate into this training, which is largely focused on HIV-related topics, ongoing attention to the counseling skills, not just attending to the counseling skills when they had the counseling modules in the week, but rather we were forced to think about continuously building their peer counseling skills as they gained and learned the other topics that they needed to do. So I think it affected them by the specific feedback they gave, but it also affected us as trainers by keeping us on our toes and making us aware in a way that we can, when you're kind of working your way through a training and you know what you need to get through, and you can kind of forget about some other things. And I think it kept us on our toes. The using equip kept us on our toes as well. And I showed you this, how it can be used. So we hope to get to the point where we can, in their ongoing mentorships, potentially, as I said, we bring them together in their districts, all the cats from a district. And it may, in Harare, we've got 80-something cats. In some of the districts, we may have 25 or 40, but they can be really geographically quite dispersed. We bring them together for their, what we call their CATS coordination meetings, but we can do skills building then. And we can say that as a group, we knew that by the end of the training, that as a group, they really needed more attention given to exploration of their networks and involving family members, for example. And we can put together some activities that really work on building those skills. And we also can use it on individual supervisions on specifically what skills an individual CATS needs to do. So I think, again, I would really encourage people to, if you are in positions where you are training peer counselors, to look into it. I think it is a really useful tool that I was more excited about at the end of it than I was at the beginning. And I kind of became a convert when I saw the effect that it had on us as trainers and as on the young people who are the peer counselors, the difference it made in their self-confidence, their counseling skills. I felt by the end of the training and watching some of their role plays, I would put them up against many professional counselors. I mean, they really, it was fun to watch, and it was impressive. So again, thank you. And I'm interested in people's reaction, thoughts, when you think about the work that you do and the places that you work, the counselors that you work with, I mean, the peer counselors, if there are ways that this is at all seems useful, or you could see ways to do it. As far as what's available, I mean, certainly in Zimbabwe, we've had, there's, been Zimbabwe is kind of in the epicenter of the top, since HIV, through the AIDS epidemic. It was, one of the top 6 countries, South Africa, Lesotho, Namibia, Botswana, Zimbabwe. It's that little pocket there. It's kind of the epicenter. And there has been a tremendous amount of work done over the years since the mid-'80s. And so now, and again, this is a combination of commitment on the part of Ministry of Health, as well as donor countries and donor organizations, that there's, for the most part, access to ARVs now, as well as post-exposure and certainly there's a push towards accessing PrEP for individuals who are at risk and are at risk for a number of reasons, whether it's in a discordant couple or people who sell sex, or men who have sex with men, any of the key populations. There's really efforts on all of those areas within the clinics. And then our CATS are this piece specifically for the young people who are not as well served, we know are at higher risk. They're higher risk for mental health problems. They're at higher risk for poor adherence to care, for poor identification of HIV, access to care, or adhering. And one of the things we certainly see in our population is a certain amount of and this is, we also try to convince the cat or make sure the cats are well aware of, when we see a high viral load in an adolescent or a young person, explore what's going on with their mental health, because it really is, oftentimes they'll tell you they've stopped taking their medication because what's the point? Life is difficult. It's not ever going to be good. I don't have a future anyway. Why should I take my medication? And so, it's our cats who are then can say, I felt like that. I understand. This is some of the self-disclosure. I know when I first learned that I was positive, I thought my life was over. But look at me, I'm healthy, I'm active, I'm, got my dreams for the future, or I'm married and have a child, and, and my child is negative. And so the peer counselors are really in a position to support. We've got, if you're interested in exploring, we've got our website, which is www.zvandiri.org. We've got a lot of videos, animations, stories in our resources. We've got a whole area of resources for supporting young people living with HIV. And so if you're interested, it might be something you might want to explore a bit. I would say in a lot of areas in Zimbabwe, I can't speak to the mid-'80s. I was not there then, so whether it's better, but it is still tremendous stigma that the young people live with, and discrimination, and a lot of messages just that they are just not wanted, not worth anything. Even where we've got one of our projects going on is with caregivers, where we have our cats using animations, engaging caregivers in discussions about disclosure, adherence, and stigma. And they were talking about what they're learning in a way in their conversations. And they were saying that they can't believe still caregivers worried that other people in the household are going to get HIV from the young person who has it. Still today, cups, plates, blankets, have your own. It's amazing. You'd think that the information has been out there long enough. It's not for lack of effort of getting it out there. There have been lots of very smart people putting together lots of initiatives, but it's hard to overcome some myths and stuff. So it's interesting. So Juliet and Marcelin, any thoughts, comments?
Hi, I just want to say thank you, first of all, for your presentation. Very well put together, very informative for me. My question is, on the onset back in the day, when there was the pipeline, the New Mexico, the new drugs, okay, back then it was called HART. And there's always been a disparity in global countries to have access to medication. Do you have like a collaboration with a pharmaceutical company that gives y'all the medications for the population of the people that you serve? Because I heard, if I'm correct, like I'm visually impaired, so I rely on my hearing a lot. So you said it was a pilot program?
No, that would have been my lack of pronunciation, apparently.
Okay. So how long has your program been in effect in the global countries that you serve?
Zvandiri in Zimbabwe started in 2004. But it started as a support group of 6 young people on the living room sofa of the executive director of Zvandiri, because the young people then from the health clinic were saying, we need more than just the medicines. We need more support. And so they started with a support group, and then it built. And then this idea of the peer counselors came in. It started scaling in the country in 2009, I believe. And then it's been since 2018 that the model has been picked up and scaled in other countries. Access to medication, how exactly they work that out is on a level that I'm not involved in. That's through government, that's Ministry of Health with donors. But in Zimbabwe, there is pretty good access to medication. The barrier is more getting tested. Still can be a barrier at times. In some other countries I've worked with, the medication availability is not always as consistent. So it's there, but then there's stockouts and they're not getting some in, and this area doesn't have it, and there's not enough we certainly run into sometimes stockouts of specific ARVs, but for the most part, the ARVs are available. And that does depend. I think that varies some country to country. But there's been global efforts, I think, to, for the most part, get the medications into countries, not always successfully to all who need it. But again, I think some of that is availability, and some of it is still the resistance to testing, and that still relates to the stigma. And to somehow this, as long as I don't know, I'm okay.
I find that, here in the state where I reside, there's I would like to say a different type of engagement. For myself, I took the initiative to become more knowledgeable through the education, and that's what prompted me to take the training to become a licensed HIV testing counselor, because what I got interested in when I obtained a job in a perinatal clinic with women that were coming from global countries here to the United States, and being blessed to serve and to learn about their country, their culture, what it was like, for pregnant women, and access to care was just not available at that time.
Mhm.
And I wanted to learn about the perinatal, so that kind of prompted me to get the license and to continue my education. But in the state that I reside, I would love to see the collaboration, because it's two different entities, where the HIV that is ran by the state that I live in have a collaboration to teach and to educate, the peers to obtain the same information, because it's very academic when you take the training, and sometimes people have challenges with comprehension, less than reading, and then there's an examination. And I would love to see that broken down to like a more simplified, modified way that it could be connected with the peers, because as we all know, right here in the United States, there's still a lot of health disparities and access to care, for any ethnicity and, insurance. But I really want to clap my hands to you and say thank you, because that was always a prayer for me. When you watch the news or you read information, and being blessed to live in the United States, just to have access to medication for whatever the case may be, and to see places that didn't have it, and people were literally dying because they did not have the heart, they did
Mhm.
not have the education, they did not have the support. And I continue to encourage you to keep doing the good work that you do. And you gave me a plethora of knowledge, and I'm
Well,
humbly grateful.
I'm glad. And I will say, and I think it's important, and I'm sure you know all too well, being in this field, that yes, we are fortunate to have resources in the US, but they don't reach everybody. And we have horrendous disparities here as well. And I think we do well to always stay cognizant of that. In terms of the, academic versus more geared towards peers, one thing we do, even when we are asked, because we are, the Ministry of Health in Zimbabwe has taken our model up as the model for care and treatment of children, adolescents, young adults living with HIV. And so we'll be asked, to come give a talk on children HIV or adolescents and HIV at the medical school, at major hospitals, at global meetings. And we always have at least part of the talk given by a young person themselves, one of our cats, because we say they are the experts, really. The other thing, though, I would say, if you have a chance, go to our website. We've got on our resources, we've got animations for explaining the immune system, explaining HIV and ART and how it works, viral suppression, that are geared towards children and adolescents. And it really breaks it down, but I think it's useful for they're geared towards children, can be understood by children, but I don't think they're insultingly dumb, low level for adults as well. So I think it gives some pretty straightforward, easy to understand tools for explaining. So when if you get a chance, if you go to the website, it's we've got a section of resources, and when you do that, there's a drop down, and there's videos, there's stories, there's publications, there's research. It's all broken down by that, but there's quite a few animations now that we use with the young people.
And you said the name of the website was zvandiri.org?
Zvandiri.
Jun?
ZV. I was going to say ZV because I'm always there. ZVANDIRI.
I had the last part right. Thank you.
And if you forget the name, if you look, it says that, like for this talk, it says Carol Wogren Zvandiri. So if you forget it, you can look at the conference, the title of when it says presenter, the name's there. Thank you. The other thing, if you just want something fun and uplifting when you look at peers and peer counselors and how they feel about themselves, there's a video called This Is Me. And it is, if anybody saw the movie The Greatest Showman, which is the circus, we got Nicola, our director, who spoke at this conference last year, our executive director, she got permission to do a version of this. And so we have a version because the lyrics are so applicable to any stigmatized group, but certainly our young people. So it's very uplifting. It's very uplifting and great talent. So that's a fun one to watch. It's called This Is Me. You can also Google This Is Me Zimbabwe or This Is Me Zvandiri on YouTube, and you'll get it. And it's a fun, like 3.5 or 4 minute, if you want a nice little uplifting music and dance.